car from North and South Carolina. If you all read your newsletter, then you know pretty much what's going on. We're still working on the same things we've been working on. The schoolhouse. The nominating committee is working. The Lorenz Award committee is working. The museum committee is working. Program committee's been working. I'm not sure what I'm forgetting, but we're all working. It's just that there's nothing really new to tell you today. Fred Schmidt has to be out of town. I don't know where Bob Johnson is tonight, but anyway, and Mary Voss is here. But if any of you have a Lorenz Award forms filled out and ready to give someone, Mary Voss in the back is ready to take those. If not, if you check the back of your newsletter on the back page, it tells you what to do and who to send it to. Now, does anybody besides Jane have some announcements to make for this evening? Merle.
As you know, the Heritage Festival is on the docket for September 15th, 16th, 17th, and volunteers are needed. But we particularly, as I indicated in the newsletter, we need some persons for publicity. Someone that would be just delighted and to write copy for all our local newspapers. Someone who will follow up on phone calls to those individuals and museums and magazines that receive our press release. So publicity is not one job for one person. So if there is some portion of publicity that you would like to do, or you know someone that would like to do it, please let me know. Our first planning meeting is this Sunday, 4 o'clock at my home. Anyone wanting to be a part of this planning committee, please come. You're more than welcome.
I also wanted to let you know that tickets are for sale right over here for the pub party, which is coming up on the 18th of March. If you can't be here, raffle tickets are available, $10 each or 3 for $25. Trip to Ireland, so it's worth a few bucks to take the chance. Jane?
Okay. Good evening, folks. I understand we have a little competition with some basketball games, but I'm glad to see so many people came out. I just wanted to give you a little rundown on future meetings. April 12th, we'll have our annual Heritage Preservation Awards. And it's always a rather festive evening because we have often the homeowners, and in the case of homes that have been recently rehabbed, we'll have the builders here. May 10th, we have our annual meeting, election of officers, and a preview from Jim Schmeeken on the new exhibit, which will be opening on the 27th of May to Historical Society members. And we're going to raise a roof again, and that should be rather interesting. A little aside to that, next month, the April meeting, I'll have the calendar to ask people to sign up, and I see many of my museum volunteers sitting here waiting, so if you'll bring your own calendar that day, you can get first choice on the dates. Okay, our monthly meeting for June will be the 14th, and this is going to be an architectural walking tour of Saugatuck. We will charter the trolley for those who feel that they cannot walk. And we have a special treat. We'll be going through one of the homes that is in our new Raising the Roof book. So this should be kind of interesting. The July meeting, the Schoolhouse Committee has asked to have that meeting, and they will have to give you information about it. That'll be the 12th of July. So that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Jane. Be sure and thank our hostesses this evening for refreshments. We never know for sure if we're going to get any or not, so Alice and Natalie, thank them for our refreshments for this evening. Then I would like to turn the meeting over to Ellen.
Thank you. And thank you, Kit, for bringing your sound system this evening because it has far less static than the other one. Thank you very much. Well, this is Women's History Month, and so in keeping with Women's History Month, Jane Underwood was quite inspired and thought that we needed to deal with and have a program dealing with the famous and the notorious women of Saugatuck, people of notoriety. I mean, that's the derivation of notorious. And so, I know, but, and so we will have two speakers this evening. And so, respecting the fact that earlier this evening, are you going first or is she's going first?
You're going to say something. I have something to say, and then she's going to, and then there's other things happening.
Excellent. So, respecting the fact that earlier today when Kit was given her name badge, she said, oh, I really don't need this because when you're notorious. And so in introducing Kit, I think that she's notorious, but in a wonderful way. No one in our community, I don't think, has written more books about local history on such a variety of different topics. You've done at least 3 exhibits at the museum, right? At least 3, because I can think of, all right, 4. And then, of course, I think notorious should go along with native. And the reason I say notorious and native is because one of the debates that goes on in this community is, unless you were born here, you're really not from Saugatuck, or you really don't live in Douglas. And so you can live here almost a lifetime, but if you weren't born here, it doesn't make you a native. So we have notorious and native because I think one of the things that most of us know about Peggy is that she is a native. And she comes from other natives that have lived in our community. So I think it's quite an honor for us to have you so willing to talk about and surprise us about the notable and the notorious. So Peggy, now it's your turn. Thank you.
I don't need to be saying anything. She did. Thank you. But Saugatuck has always been noted for strong women. I recall some gentlemen saying, well, this is a squaw town. And they probably nameless, but they're all gone now. But Jane asked me if I could present some sort of a program about women in Saugatuck. It wasn't, oh dear, who can we find? But it was, oh my, which one shall we choose this time? And I think that there's been some good portrayals of early pioneer women, such as Mrs. Butler, and others were presented here at the Historic Cemetery tour last year. And if you missed that tour, you missed such a good one. And then May Frances Heath, she was a local late 19th, early 20th century ground dame. She was very well portrayed and presented at the 100-year Women's Club Follies by Mary Ann Curtis. And now, so we're going to bring some different people in. And our emphasis this time is going to be on communications. So we have some excellent communicating women. And Kit is going to introduce us to the first ones.
When somebody who was probably a woman got this brilliant idea for this program. It was obvious that our town has been blessed with notable women through the ages. But the one that came immediately to my mind was not a woman who was resident of this town, but a visitor. Susan B. Anthony. Massachusetts-born Susan Brownell Anthony was an early advocate of giving the vote to women. 1869, she organized the National Women's Suffrage Association and set out stumping the country for her cause. In March of 1879, she had a scheduled lecture at the Powers Opera House in Grand Rapids. And at some point in her stay, she was approached by Mrs. Tamara Moore. Her husband was the one who owned the lumber mill that was kind of back behind the Park B&B. In fact, it's that right where, goodness, what do they call that? The Elbow Room. It's something else now. Okay, the Elbow Room Restaurant. Anyhow, that was where his mill was. She asked Miss Anthony if she could come to Saugatuck. And there was apparently very little advance notice. She just turned up in Grand Rapids and asked her. And in the February 28th commercial record, there's a notice over here that just says, Susan B. Anthony is coming. And another notice a little further down that says, arrangements have been made with Miss Susan B. Anthony to deliver her great lecture, Women Wants Bread, Not the Ballot, at this place soon. Exact date will be given next week. Anxiously, they watched for the next week. Once again, there were two columns. Over here, it says, come out next Wednesday night and hear the most famous woman in America. Not exactly headlines. And way down here at the bottom, Susan B. Anthony will deliver her celebrated lecture, Woman Wants Bread, Not the Ballot, at Morrison's Hall next Wednesday evening under the auspices of the Saugatuck Lecture Association. Tickets, 26 cents. Children under 12, 15 cents. Tickets for sale at the post office and the stores of A.B. Taylor, F.A. Winslow, C.E. Wells, C.E. Bird, Calvin Whitney, D.L. Barber at Saugatuck, and at the post office and the Clean's drugstore in Douglas. If those living in Douglas who wish to attend leave their names at the post office or at McLean's drugstore, a team will call for them. Organization or what? They were certainly hoping for a better result than had occurred in Grand Rapids. There, the Grand Rapids editor had written an account, and he said, a miss of an uncertain number of years, more or less brains, a slimsy figure, nutcracker face, and store teeth goes raiding around the country, attempting to teach mothers and wives their duty. This is Susan B. Anthony. Having snuffed out tobacco, Susan launches a tirade at whiskey, and having disposed of this, the Chinese, Negro, and school question, she returns to her revels and gets in the finishing shoulder hits on man. And this mild-mannered woman represents the rights portion of her sex and makes men glad that they have always voted no on the question of extending suffrage to them. Well, we looked at Susan B. Anthony. To me, she's an absolutely unremarkable looking person. I wouldn't call her a great beauty, but she's not ridiculously ugly either. But there must have been something that raised powerful hackles because the newspapers continually remarked on her physical appearance. The March 7th issue of the newspaper said she was coming. And when she arrived in town, she went to stay at one of Saugatuck's grandest buildings, the house of Mrs. Moore. This is what is now the Park House Bed and Breakfast on Holland Street. Although those who know assure me that there never was a bay window like that, that was some artist's conception or misconception. It never looked exactly like it does in that picture. That picture is from an 1880 engraving, so it would have been more or less contemporary with the visit. After the description in the Grand Rapids newspaper, I was quite excited to see what the Saugatuck newspaper had to say. And she might have been the most famous woman in the world, but in the Saugatuck newspaper, she was at the bottom of the column, where it says, "The lecture given by Miss Susan B. Anthony at Oddfellows Hall on Wednesday evening was all that could be expected. The audience was the largest we have seen in Saugatuck for many years, and everyone seemed to enjoy it very much. Miss Anthony is a fine speaker and has a clear, ringing voice so that she could be heard distinctly in every part of the house. She thoroughly understands her subject and is laboring zealously for the women's suffrage cause, of which she is an able expounder." So at least she could be heard in every corner of the house. A similar account was offered in the Allegan paper. It read, "The lecture by Susan B. Anthony drew together such an audience as is seldom seen in Saugatuck. The hall was crowded and the several votes taken demonstrated that the talented speaker carried her hearers with her." These reporters are obviously in no offense mode. The newspaper did talk about a change of venue from Morrison's Hall. Morrison's Hall being the upper floors of Morrison's store, which was kind of in the middle of the street next to the Hotel Butler, where the Hotel Butler is now, to Oddfellows Hall. And Oddfellows Hall was in the upper floors of this building, still standing on the corner of Mason and Butler Street. In fact, in this picture, down below it says A.B. Taylor Store. It later belonged with the George Goshorn Landmark Store, and even later with Flint's. And up here, there even is a little plaque that says IOOF, International Order of the Oddfellows. It's very likely that the lecture was moved there because there was more room than there was in Morrison's Hall. It was brand new, wasn't more than a couple of months old. It was common back in the old days for ballrooms and meeting rooms to be built in the upper floors of buildings where they had fewer support beams to get in the way, because it was left to support. There was an account written by the Moore descendants, the people who were her hosts in Saugatuck in the Congregational Church history, and it said that Miss Anthony remained in town for a week and maybe 2 weeks. That would have not been characteristic. I'm not sure I believe that. Mrs. Winona Sherwood was formerly Winnie Moore, and she would have been a fairly small child, so maybe it just seemed like a week. She wrote, "Each evening Miss Anthony addressed the assemblage. She, delicate of stature, extremely effeminate in manner, dressed in man's attire, would seem ludicrous. But she was shown every respectful courtesy and was successful in closing 6 of the 14 saloons then in operation." The comment about the clothing is rather strange. She might well have worn some version of the famous bloomer costume. This was intended to free women from the bondage of cumbersome clothing, replacing flowing skirts that swept the floor in an unsanitary way and tripped up young homemakers with shorter skirts and full black Turkish-style trousers. By 1879, the women had kind of softened their stand on clothing because it seemed to get in the way of their larger message. The men, of course, always said, "Oh, the women don't not only want the vote, they want our pants too." But it may well be, this meeting was held in early March, it may well be that in the cold of the Michigan March, he put on her bloomers. In Saugatuck, there was a real attempt at cracking down on saloons for a while. It wore off. Susan B. Anthony died in 1906 at the age of 86 without seeing her dream come true. The vote was finally extended to women nationwide with the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920. And that just seems amazing for us to think that our parents, in many instances, were not allowed to vote. One of the ladies who was undoubtedly at the meeting or meetings that were held with Susan B. Anthony was Mrs. Lena Woodhull. And I need to start you off with a lesson on the Wades. There's the Wades. Those are the ones that are the topic tonight. Jonathan Wade, this one, came to Singapore in the 1840s, and he was an early sawmill owner, and not a very successful one. In fact, there are some who say he burned down his sawmill for the insurance. One of the workers in his mill was his younger brother, Nelson, who had come from Canada in 1840 when he was 18. Not satisfied with area women, or perhaps there were none, he moved on to Otsego, where he married in 1840 to Mary Updike, and they moved back to Canada. Then Nelson's brother, Jonathan, his older brother you'll know, had a new idea. In 1851, he founded a town that would later be called Douglas. Because the town was so slow growing, he called all the family members he could contact to come and increase the population. He named the new town Dudleyville as an added enhancement for his brother, Dudley, and his family to come. I don't know why he didn't name it Nelsonville, but maybe he thought Dudley needed the extra encouragement. Anyhow, Nelson answered the call, and he returned to Michigan, bringing his wife, his 3 children born in Canada, and after they arrived here, they had a bunch more. Frank, born in 1853, was the first white child born in Douglas, and lived in Douglas until his death as a very old man. Here's the family. Here's Nelson's family on the 1860 census. Nelson Wade, Mary Wade, and the one that looks like Larry but isn't, that's actually Lanny or Lena, Jane, Warren, Frank, somebody else from George, and a German farm laborer. Lena was nearly a teenager when they moved to Douglas, and she was schooled locally and with one of the first school teachers in the county. She married Frank Higgins, who died 5 years later. I was unable to find a marriage record for her in this county. There were 3 Frank Higgins who lived in the county. 2 were about the right age. One a farmer in Heath Township, and one of them a clerk in Allegan. I suspect the clerk in Allegan was the one she married. But she might have gotten her Frank Higgins elsewhere, maybe Chicago. There were lots of Frank Higgins in Chicago. After Frank died, she returned to the Saugatuck area and married Robert Woodhull in 1874. The Saugatuck newspaper was founded in 1868 as the Saugatuck Commercial. After a series of owners, Charles Wasson took over the paper about 1877. And people who run newspapers, especially in the early days, are one of 2 kinds of people. Either they are printers who hire writers, or they are writers who hire printers. And Charlie Wasson was a printer, and he hired Dr. McLean. The Dr. McLean whose drugstore you met at to go to the lecture. He hired him as an editor. Dr. McLean was probably the one that wrote about Susan B. Anthony. And it's kind of interesting, that non-committal little piece of the newspaper, because he was later president of the Red Ribbon Club. One of the things that Susan B. Anthony's lecture brought about was a Women's Christian Temperance Union here in town. And they had a Red Ribbon Club and a White Ribbon Club. And a Red Ribbon Club is for men who vow never to drink again. And they get little red ribbons tied in their lapel. White ribbons are for children who have never had a drink and don't intend to, I believe. A month after Susan B. Anthony was in town, with no mention of it in the news columns whatsoever, Mrs. Lena Woodhull suddenly turns up in the masthead of the Commercial Record as editor. Now this is fairly remarkable. I mean, we're talking 1879. In 1879, especially if you were a married woman, and this married woman had small children, you didn't work outside the house. And married women in general stuck to school teaching, clerking, bookkeeping occasionally. But an editor was a very unusual thing. I've read something by the Women's Journalism Honorary that says she was one of the first women editors in the state of Michigan. But when she first took over, there was just no comment to it whatsoever. Just bang, her name appeared there, and she started writing. If you read the 1880 Allegan County history, it talks about the present, this is the present editor of the paper as being L.E. Woodhull. No mention whatsoever of her gender. In February of 1880, Charlie Watson went off to Spring Lake, and there was a change. Mrs. Woodhull became her newspaper. She was not only editor, in fact, she was not only editor, she was on the secondary masthead here, she was proprietress. I own the place, make no mistake about that. And I always appreciated her little squib here. It says, published every Friday morning by Mrs. Lena Woodhull, office on Butler Street. Subscription $1 per year, invariably in advance. We got to tell Michael to try that one. On the 1880 census, she's living in Saugatuck, married to Robert Woodhull, who's a sailor, and has a 10-year-old and 6-year-old from the first marriage. Down at the bottom, her brother, Fred Wade, this is her baby brother, who was born in Douglas, is living with her, and his occupation is a printer. This is probably in the home that Fred Wade occupied for a good many years, at the corner of Butler and Spear Streets, where Verse White lived. Or still does, maybe. That was the Wade household. To honor her little brother's work in the paper, the next masthead in March 10th, 1882, read Woodhull and Wade. Now, instead of honoring him, it must have scared him to death, because in the April newspaper, there was a new owner listed up here, Adrian Houtkamp, and in this valedictory piece that Mrs. Woodhull wrote, she said, "We have the gratification of leaving the paper in a better condition financially and with a much larger circulation than it ever attained under any former management. It leaves our hands one of the best appointed offices in the county, and with a circulation second only to the Allegan Journal. We have no cause for severing our connection with the paper, except the weariness of public life and newspaper duties on the part of the senior member of the firm, and a desire to enter a larger field of labor on the part of the junior member." Later that year, she and her husband moved to Rochester, New York, and she continued as a writer, being especially known for her grasp of politics. She was sent to Chicago to cover the National Convention for one of the Rochester papers, and this, too, was a remarkable task for a woman in the 1880s. No idea how long she lived in New York State. I tried to track her, Her obituary states that she traveled for Western railroads as a descriptive writer. So I started hunting for her in the 1900 census. And to my amazement, I found her, and it was no feeling that it might not be her because she's listed on the census as Lena Wade Woodhull in Custer County, Colorado. Where her husband Robert is described as a steamboat captain. Rosita is a ghost town out there. Was a silver mining town. This was the town they lived in. With a population of over 2,000 in its heyday, but it's an absolute ghost town now. Although, when I looked it up on MapQuest, in the middle of Custer County, which was not terribly well inhabited, there was a star. No roads get to it, but there was a star in the middle of the county marking the site of Rosita. And they did have a newspaper. They had a picture of the newspaper, the Rosita Index. So that may have been the one she was editor of. It's still, you don't see a river nearby either. It makes you wonder how the steamboat captain got to work. He must have taken a train. Her younger brother, Fred, must have tried the larger field of labor, but in 1886, when Adrian Houtkamp left, angered because of the beginning of the weekly record in Douglas, a consortium of local businessmen bought the paper and set him up as editor, a position he held for 12 years. During some of that time, he was village president, postmaster, and a member of the House of Representatives. That's Fred. Lena Woodhull died October 5th, 1908 in Muskegon, was buried in Fremont. And just by the way, she was not the last female editor of the Saugatuck newspaper. The wife of Linsford B. Goshorn ran the paper for more than a year after the death of her husband in 1926-27. Mary Kay Vettles, better known as the caretaker of Oxbow, was editor for over a year during the time that Ted Van Dusen was the owner in the 1950s. And its ownership was often in the hands of couples. Mr. and Mrs. Russell Madden in the 1930s, Gwen and Bob Crawford in the 1940s, Bob and Ed Bigelow in the 1950s. I even ran it myself once for 2 weeks when Art got scarlet fever. So maybe we are a squaw town, Peggy. Maybe we are. Well, whoever remembers how to put the screen up himself. Can you do it? Okay.
Hello there. We have a slightly different approach, and I hope that you enjoy these are little vignettes, a day in the life. And now I'm going to introduce you to two sisters.
Can we get some light on Ted?
Well, we're going up there.
Oh, okay.
That's fine, Ted.
I'll go up now. Is that better?
Yes.
I know. Okay, we're going to introduce you to two sisters. Irene was born in 1898 and Abby in 1900. They were the daughters of Miller and Abby Wheeler Robinson. Their mother died when Abby was 2, and these two girls had a rather tumultuous childhood with more than one stepmother, twin half-sisters, Mabel and Mary, lots of travel from Florida to Michigan, to California, to Michigan, and back to Saugatuck, finally to live with their Aunt Martha and Grandpa Wheeler in the big Wheeler house on Water Street. They came back to school after missing 2 years with all these upheavals, and they played on the basketball team in the high school, and I have their yearbook from 1919, and they joined the Campfire Girls, and both graduated eventually with honors. And their daddy, Miller Robinson, came back in the summer with his 4th wife and the twin sisters and ran his souvenir and watch repair business on Butler Street, but he hated the cold, so he spent his winters in Florida. Irene and Abby had summer jobs, working at the new Parrish's drugstore, This was a very busy place when they were still in high school, especially after the movies. And hollow dips, girls, hollow dips. Mrs. Parrish would run around and admonish the girls that were scooping the ice cream treats to make sure that they didn't get too much ice cream. The girls also worked at the movie theater, selling and taking tickets. It was 10 cents a show. And then Abby's job was to rewind the big reels of film. And sometimes the longer movies had 3 reels, and then there'd have to be a pause to wind up one of those reels because the theater only owned 2 reels, 2 empties. So it took a little finesse to show a whole picture. But their real job came when they were in their 20s. The telephone company had outgrown the little switchboard in the back of Miller Robinson's store where it had been, along with the Western Union key. And it was moved upstairs to the front of the new Heath building on the corner of Culver, I think it's Culver.
No,
Hoffman and Butler, excuse me. Irene was the head operator. She got $2 a day. And her assistant was Abby, $1 a day. They were on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sleeping and cooking and living there. It was their home. And because they didn't go out much, they made it the place to be. So I'm going to set a little scene here. This is the telephone office. I'm going to use my classroom voice. I hope you can hear me. This is Abby. She's seated at the switchboard. Let me set the scene. The switchboard is here. There's a door. There's a stairway to come up. Now this is land sharks now. And the upstairs, the windows face, let me read it, I've got it better in here. Yeah. And it's owned by the Ken Troutmans. It's recently been restored and it looks really beautiful. It looks the way it did when it was new, only even better. The office was entered by climbing up a long stairway, and you can see it says Landshark Lofts on the door today. So if you want to look and see where that is, then it goes up, and those were high ceilings, so those meant long stairways. And then there was a hallway, and the telephone office, I would come up the stairs here, right about here. This is where we come up, and come into a door. This way, the switchboard would be on my right, and the windows, Butler Street, you guys are sitting in Butler Street as we speak. So that might help. There was one toilet and a sink at the end of the hall, which was shared by the girls in the telephone office and whoever lived in the other apartment. So here's Abby, and I am Irene. And we're going to have to read this. So here I come in the door.
Oh, good, Irene. You're back from Reed's grocery store. Gracie Wilson called, and she'll be over with Garth and Billy. And Dr. Walker left a few names here in case we need to reach him this afternoon. The list is up here on the board.
Well, I'm putting away my groceries. Oh, you've had a busy afternoon, haven't you? Where is my ukulele? I can't find it. It's not here. I was just gone a few minutes, but Matt and Reed and Alita are coming over on their way, and they're going to the pavilion tonight. So I thought I'd better stir up the cake. And then I'll take over the switchboard so you can go out for a while.
Oh, well, thanks. And Precious needs to go out. He hasn't been down for a while.
Precious is such a sweet kitty, and you know, it's so great because we just put her in the basket and out the window, and down she goes. And that works really well, you know. We don't have to be running up and down the stairs there, Precious is. And then when it's time for her to come in, we put the basket back down and she'll climb right in. Isn't that good? He's a sweetheart. Such a good boy.
Number, please. Is it too late to call the commercial? but you know they might have gone home. No, I'm sorry, but there's nobody there. You better try again Monday. Okay, I'll be all set now. I've got the cake in the oven and it'll be fine. The Wilsons are here already. Oh, hello, Dave. What are you boys up to this evening? It's Dave Webster and his friends, Irene, John Barrett and Don Devine. And Dave is here, I bet you to call Chicago again, so I'll let you make the connections. Oh, okay. Glenn, operator, I need to be put through so we can reach Chicago. South Haven, number please. South Haven, put us through to Benton Harbor. We're connecting to Chicago. Benton Harbor. Oh, keep the lines open, please. This is Saugatuck. We need Chicago. My mother said it took a lot of yelping to do a long distance call. Louder, please. There's too much static. Benton Harbor. This is Saugatuck. We're calling them down. 452 in Chicago. I'll put you through to Michigan This is Saugatuck calling us down. 4524 in Chicago. Oh, Dave, you know, there's terrible connections tonight. It's windy, and the branches hit the line, and honey, we lost Benton Harbor. Wait, we lost Michigan City. Oh, Benton Harbor. Bring them again. Michigan City. We need Chicago. Chicago. Please bring us down. 45224. This is us down. 4524. Oh, Dave, here's your call. You better sit here. You're not going to hear a thing on that other phone. Okay, Dave, keep yelling. Oh, and here come the Wilsons. Oh, those wild Wilson boys are here. Oh, hello, Don, and how have you been? And this is great. I'm so glad you're up here tonight. No, Billy, that's not for you to play with. Oh, somebody better get the cat. It's time for her to come in. He's ready to come up. Come on, Kitty. Oh, and here comes Stanley in the window, too. Okay, Dave's on this phone call now. Well, Irene, we're all going to go to the pavilion now for a while to dance, and the Wilson boys can stay here with you at the telephone office, okay? Oh, all right. Good. Well, we'll have a little party, and the cake will be waiting when you get back. Now, if I could just find one you will need it. Okay. Well, we're off. This should be a good night. All right. Do you know who's playing tonight? The young people would return to the telephone office after an hour or two of dancing and enjoy refreshments, talk, laughing, and singing, with Irene playing the ukulele, and these gathers were frequent. Dave Webster had come to Saugatuck by sailing with his family from Jackson Park in the annual race between Chicago and Saugatuck. He loved the company at the telephone office and chose to stick around, and he and Abby went dancing frequently. But Irene married Dave. Irene was the cake baker, you know. They come back to the cakes. And she married Dave Webster in October of 1927, and they were married up above what is now the Singapore Bank. Well, they were married in the bookstore, the Singapore Bank bookstore. And it was where Gracie Wilson lived. And Garth and Billy spent a lot of time in the telephone office because they were there, and my mother was there, and Gracie liked to go places. So she would leave the boys, and that was fine. And Abby stayed on as an operator until she married Ward B. Young,
a Hope pre-med student. He probably had to make a lot of calls too. They were married in October of 1929, and other Saugatuck women followed as operators. Among them were Bee Finch and Irma Fuller. And that's the end of that story. Now we're going to introduce you to another lady that you'll all recognize.
I'm Peggy Boyce's daughter, Linda Kinneman, and I don't know if she introduced my oldest sister, Cathy Brockington, eldest of the 8 of us. And tonight, I'm going to do a brief portrayal of the infamous and famous Bobby McCrae. Bobby and her daughter, Taru, and her granddaughter, Aisha, and her great-grandchildren are here tonight also. So forgive me, Taru, if I blow it, okay? But it is with the greatest respect that I try to portray your mother. Bobby was born in Indianapolis in 1910, where she grew up. As a young adult, she came to Michigan. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, she went with a friend to a New Year's Eve party to celebrate the end of 1933. There she was introduced to a handsome man named Lynn McCrae. They were married a year later. He was in the hotel restaurant business and owned Lynn's Inn in Ocean City, Maryland. When the Maplewood Hotel was listed for sale, they came to Saugatuck in 1953 with their 2 daughters, Sandy and Taru. Eventually, there were 5 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. So far, right? 3 great-grandchildren, okay. The Maplewood became a great hub of activity. Lynn McCrae ran for office and was the mayor of Saugatuck for several years. He also ran a taxi service meeting the trains in Holland and Fenville, as well as local calls around the area. The Greyhound bus station moved from the corner of Butler and Culver, where it used to stop at Snug Harbor, a little bus station that was torn down for the Culligan plant. The Maplewood became the police dispatch station in 1957 when the base station was installed. This became the radio connection between the police in Saugatuck-Douglas and Allegan County. It was installed at the hotel because someone was there 24 hours a day. Bobby spent much of her time at her roll-top desk, telephone by her side for taxi and hotel calls, mic in hand with the squawk box, the radio receiver scanner, at her elbow, and the endless coffee cup within easy reach. The phone would ring for a taxi or a hotel room. The buses came and went on a regular basis, and she sold the tickets, and the police calls were intermittent throughout the day and night. In the summer, on a Saturday night or weekend, the police radio was never quiet. This was the area of jazz festivals, crowds of college revelers on holiday weekends, motorcycle groups at the sandbar, and continual fights at the boathouse. So she was busy. She also rang the fire whistle and told the firemen where the action was. All the police and fire calls rang there first. She had time to collect music boxes, about 60 of them, and salt and pepper shakers, over 1,000 sets. She was a good mom, she had time for that too, and a campfire girls leader, and even had some fun now and then. Taru earned her FCC license by the time she was 14 so that Bobby and Lynn could go out to the town and country dances and a few other social events. And then, I'll just tell you some of the police chatter that they used. 10-7 meant that the person or the car was out of service, like I'll be home. 10-7, I'll be home. 10-8 is in service, meaning the car was ready for calls. 10-4 meant okay, and usually followed every announcement and response. 10-10 meant assistance needed. 10-10 at the boathouse meant that every available officer came to the rescue. 10:20 would be the location. Will be 10:20 at the Oval, or 10:20 at the Redwood, which was a very popular stop, and of course 10:04, 10:04. Car 7 was the chief's car. Car 8 was Breckenridge's car, which Jim Boyce and Hilton Brown also used that car. And car 9 was Maury Herbert. The city owned one car, and that was the chief's. The rest belonged to the guys, and they would get 10 cents a mile for using their vehicles, and were paid $1 an hour.
I'll try to use my classroom voice too. And this is my roll-top desk. Well, hello, Ruthie. Come on in. Isn't it another lovely evening in Saugatuck? Saugatuck Taxi Service. Regina, hi. Yes, Lynn will be at the train station in a few minutes. Just hang on. He knows you're coming. Just wait right there. Thanks, honey. Yeah. How you doing, Ruth? How are things going? 10-4. This is Bobby. 10-4. That's a Roger, Chief, on the 10-7. Chief's going home for dinner. Okay. Calling all cars, calling all cars. Chief is 10-7. All cars stand by. 10-4. Well, anyway, Regina, isn't it funny that Regina's coming home from Chicago, and it's great. Oh, excuse me, honey. Johnson's, come on in. The girls just about have your room ready. That's right. Taru, get Sandy and come on down here. The Johnsons are here. You can help them carry your bags. Thanks. If you just be patient a minute, the girls will get right with you. Thanks. 10-4, this is Bobby. Roger that 10-10. What's your 10-20? 10-4. Calling all cars. It's 10-10. Assistance needed. 1020 Water Street in front of Coral Gables. Crowd unrest. Calling all cars. 1020 Coral Gables. 10-4. Well, Ruth, if it gets too bad, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to push the button for the fire siren, and we'll have all the boys down here to help. Maplewood Hotel, can I help you? Well, yes, we do sell bus tickets here. Yes. Yeah, come on right now. The next bus leaves in 20 minutes. Yeah, for South End. Next one here. 20 minutes. Don't be late. Oh, look, Ruth, here comes Lynn with the taxi right now. Look at Regina. Hi, honey. Look who's here. It's your kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Paul. Yes. Yes, you had, well, of course, you had all the Beckons in your kindergarten, you did. Well, she was one of my favorite campfire girls. I had such a wonderful time leading that group. Roger that 10-8, Chief. 10-10 in progress. Yes. Another at Coral Gables. Calling all cars. Another 10-20 at Coral Gables. Crowd unrest in front. They're getting pretty wild out there, boys. Hurry on over. 10-4. Like I said, Ruth, another lovely, lovely evening in Saugatuck. Sorry.
Poor lady, and this is another short one. Cora Bliss Taylor. Art is certainly the first communication, and painting is a grand thing that goes on in Saugatuck all the time. And so I'm going to have a little chat about Cora Bliss Taylor. Her biography is in Ritchie at the SCA or wherever the little robot is, and they punch the button that says Cora Bliss, and you can read up on all the facts. In the 30s, Cora Bliss Taylor had her little art school on Holland Street. Now that little house has been kind of restored, and it would be on, if you go up and meet where Lucy in Holland Street meet and go to the right a little bit, there's a white house there that's quite close to the road and a beautiful backyard behind it. And that was where she first lived in Saugatuck. And she had watercolor classes there. My first meeting with Cora Bliss Taylor was at that house. I was attending a gala evening in the backyard, and there were Japanese lanterns strung through the trees and watercolors paintings hanging from the lines, sort of like a clothesline show, and they were showing what they had done that summer. My grandmother had been taking some painting with Mrs. Taylor all summer, and this was the finale. My mother was also there with us to look at the artwork, and she had studied at Oxbow before she was married, and I'm sure she would have loved to have been in Mrs. Taylor's painting classes. Cora Bliss had 2 daughters who were at the same party, and they were a little older than I, and I think I was maybe 5 when this happened. Later, I was told that I was supposed to tell people that she had also studied in Paris, because she was very proud of the fact that she had studied her painting in Paris. I'm going to, later my own kids took some children's lessons from Mrs. Taylor, and then I was very privileged to have had 2 years of study with her, 1 day a week for 2 years. In the summer we painted outside, in the winter we painted in her living room. And just one moment, and I'm going to do the best I can to turn into Mrs. Taylor, and we're going to have an art lesson. She always wore a hat. A big hat. And she liked color. This is me. Well, good afternoon, dear. Oh, we can't wear sunglasses. Take them off. You must have a hat. The sunglasses absolutely ruin your colors. Now we'll get started with this. This is an oil painting class, by the way. And let me show you, my dear, how to put your palette together. First, we start with the cool colors over here on the left. That's right. Now you squeeze those out. Get a nice pile of color. Over on the sides, we're going to have the orange and the reds, so you can always find your colors. You shouldn't be spending your time looking around your palette to see what you mixed up. That's a good girl. Thank you. Oh, this would have to have a big, big blob of white. Everything has so much white in it. All right, now we'll do a little sketch here you've done this with your charcoal. Now I want you to take your paintbrush and some turpentine, your little one, and just quick, go over those lines. Now don't spend too much time on the sketch. You know, this isn't a drawing, this is painting. We're doing a painting. Now, that's right. All right, now we'll just let that dry about 30 seconds because that'll dry right away. It's very good. Now look, kind of shut your eyes and look for the shadows and look for the lights. That's it. Now what color do you suppose we should mix up first? We need, I'll tell you what. That's right. We need some blues up here on the top. But just take your palette knife, honey. Where's your palette knife? All right, we never mix color with a brush. Just take that palette knife and pick some little pieces with the back of the knife, that's it. And mix your blues on this side and your warm colors over here. And just swirl those colors together. There, girl. Now, don't mix them too much, they just get dead. It's
sky. All right, now let's start with the sky and work your way down. With the palette knife? No, 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 you need to brush in some of those skies. All right, just that's it. Not too smooth, you know, you just want to swirl those colors around here. All right, that's good. Now where the trees are, we need some sky looking through the trees. That's it. We need to see the sky behind it. Very good. Now we need some more color in here. Don't be afraid of color. You know, there's never too much color in painting. Well, this looks like you want black in it. Oh no, honey, we never use black. Never. Just take those dots. Take that dark green, take that blue, take that burnt umber, and swirl them together. There. That's a. Not with the brush. Let's use that. That's it. That's it. Swirl them together. Now get some of those dots up there. Under there. And underneath. That's fine. And how do you suppose you're going to do those leaves? Now don't paint one leaf at a time. Mix up the blues and yellows. Of course, there'd be pauses while we did the work. That's it. And now, this is where we use that palette knife. Just slap that on there and that up. Slap that green right up there. Use that palette knife. Get a lot of color on it. That's fine. Okay, now you can use your brush and put in some dots for those branches, and you'll have the most beautiful trees you ever saw. Oh, this is lovely. Now, what we have here in this foreground, that has a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, you know. Oh, that's lovely. That's very nice. 3 hours have passed. Would you like to show them your painting? Yes, Mrs. Taylor.
Another successful painting of your back door.
I painted with her, this was painted in 1960, and I painted with her off and on for several years, and then I went to Grand Valley and sort of left town for a few years. Not really, but yeah. But she went on, and because she did not drive, she was one of the instigators for the interurban, and she worked very hard to get the interurban installed, and she was the first passenger, and Bobby McCrae was the first dispatcher for the interurban. So this connection comes right up to the present. That's the end of our story.
Well, I want to thank all of you. This was a marvelous meeting. It was quite fun. And so, for appreciation, thank you very much.
I didn't know my sister was such a fabulous actress.